Welcome, fellow human cubs, to another episode of Ramblings, an unrepented geeking podcast. As always, I am your host, Shaun, and today we're going to be taking a look at Disney's latest big live-action remake, The Jungle Book. So, let's get right to it. Needless to say, but I'll say it anyways, because why not? Disney's current approach to taking their familiar, beloved animated properties and turning them into live-action films has met with, shall we say, mixed results. And up until now, they haven't really released a film that I think creatively truly justified it. And yeah, I kinda liked Alice in Wonderland. I know a lot of people, I just want to be clear, who abso-friggin-lutely love Alice in Wonderland. I know, online it's popular to bash this movie. I know, there's a lot of people who despise it, and fair enough. But you gotta understand, I got a job now, and I swear to God, out of curiosity, I like to ask people, during slow moments, and I'm in a pretty large office. There's, well over a couple hundred people working there. By far, the majority of people, when I brought up the Alice in Wonderland movie, the 2000 live-action remake, loved the living crap out of this film. I mean, a whole lot of them just absolutely adore this film and are so excited for Alice Through the Looking Glass. You don't even know. So, let's be clear here. Yes, Alice in Wonderland was mixed critically, and yes, a lot of people online didn't like it, but a lot of people did. But still, did it really justify... It justified maybe its own existence, but did it justify the existence of this push for these live-action remakes? No. Not a film has done that. Until now. With Jon Favreau's The Jungle Book, starring Bill Murray, Ben Kingsley, Idris Elba, and introducing as Mowgli, Neil Sethi. And I just got back from seeing the movie for a second time. I saw it on an early screening Thursday, and then I saw it again Friday. And so, I'm recording this Friday evening, so I've seen the movie twice now. And I did not see it twice for this review. I saw it twice because I wanted to see it again. Because what I got when I saw this movie, I felt like was something remarkable. And it was remarkable on a lot of levels. It was remarkable from just a movie-making level, from a craft level. The things that they did in this movie just kind of made my jaw drop, because the most incredible thing is how easy they make it look. Everything in this movie comes across effortlessly, save for maybe a couple shots here or there, but it's a rare thing when things don't look incredibly natural and beautiful. And you have to realize, the entire movie, was shot on a soundstage in Los Angeles. There was no location shooting. In a way, this was almost like the reverse of much of a film like Roger Rabbit, where you have a couple of cartoon characters traveling throughout a real world. Obviously discounting the Toontown sequences, you know what I mean. Here, we have a human actor traveling through an entire CGI world. And yes, that concept has been done before, but never, I think, this effectively, this seamlessly. The closest movie that comes to mind is, of course, James Cameron's Avatar. But even then, there were large chunks of that movie that were shot on real locations and then blended in with CGI. No, this is more along the lines, I think, of something like, what is that movie? Sky Captain and the World of Tomorrow, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's a movie, for instance, that was shot completely CGI with human actors in it, and deliberately went for a very kind of stylized look, and say something along the lines of Sin City, which again I think probably had a minimum of real sets and was mostly done in green screen. And of course, green screen locations is hardly anything new. You could go look at the footage from behind the scenes of Batman vs. Superman, which... why did I bring that up? Just causes me pain. Anyways, to see just how much CGI is in that film. But again, this is entirely CGI. CGI characters, CGI background, CGI foreground, CGI everything, save for this one human character. And remarkably, it rarely, very, very rarely, is noticeable. The thing is, all those other movies I mentioned before, it's noticeable either by design or by, just, poor effect work or just whatever, limitations of technology. It's obvious that you're looking at a false environment. Again, by design or otherwise. That is rarely, if ever, truly the case in The Jungle Book. Oh, there may be odd moments here or there, as I said, but essentially what you think you're getting is a real-looking world. It doesn't look like a CGI world. It doesn't look like you've plunked a human boy into a video game landscape. It doesn't look like a human being, an actual real human being, walking through a Pixar world. It looks like they spent a lot of time shooting CGI animals, to fill in real locations. And even then, by the way, most of the time, even that doesn't become noticeable. I mean, the animals are CGI, but damn it, if the majority of the time you really can know it. I mean, intellectually you know it, but emotionally, at least I did, and people who I talked to, who I saw it with the first night, certainly, they didn't feel false. There was not much of an uncanny valley effect. Now, I know some people talked about that from still images, but when you actually see everything in motion, that rarely, if ever, becomes an issue. At least it didn't for me. I admit I am a bit more tolerant with special effects than some. I'm never bothered, for instance, it's a show like Doctor Who, and you get obviously fake effects, because, I understand the limitations of what they're working with and all that. But still, I also always notice it, I just don't care. I'm usually pretty good at spotting and noticing these things. Certainly with at least, characters. It's a lot harder to notice when it's done well, when CGI backgrounds are inserted, or when CGI is used to tweak things here or there. I rarely felt like the animals in this movie were anything less than real. That they didn't have a presence, that they didn't have a physicality. They do. They have all of that. And that is such an accomplishment. It really is. How many times over the years have we seen obvious CGI in movies? Even good movies. And there's almost none of that here. I can literally only think of two shots where, to me, it became a little bit obvious that, you had the little bit of that green screen effect where you had Mowgli slinging through the trees at one point, being carried along by the monkeys, and I could see a little bit of the tell that, green screen and all that, but that was a very, very brief moment in, a substantial film. I mean, The Jungle Book is, let's see, how long was it? So much to keep track of. It was 105 minutes, so that's pretty damn impressive. This is a beautiful film, and in its own, it makes it look so easy. I'm not sure people quite appreciate just how insane of an accomplishment this is, just how impressive. But this really does feel like, from somebody who really studies film in the way that I do, who loves to dig into the minutia of every aspect of film, this feels like it's going to have reverberations for years to come. It doesn't come out of nowhere. It's clearly building on the past success of films like Avatar. But it definitely stands on its own as a legitimate technical accomplishment. This really does set a new standard for what can be done with all CGI environments. And it sets a new high, and it sets all sorts of new possibilities for creating seamlessly believable worlds essentially out of nothing. And so for that alone, Jungle Book is worth seeing. But it's hardly the only reason. And indeed, I was impressed from an acting level, especially with the young actor playing Mowgli, who just gives this really amazing performance when you consider the fact that he basically is sharing the screen the entire time with CGI creations. He's the only actual real-on, outside of a very brief moment here or there, he's the only actual human being on screen during the entirety of this film. And keep in mind, this kid was only 11, 12 years old when they were filming, and his only work previous to this was in a short film. So this was his first real major acting experience, and outside of a couple of moments here or there where he maybe hits the slightest false note due to, no doubt, youth and inexperience, for the most part, he gives a very convincing performance, which is important because far more so than the original animated version from Disney, Mowgli's the heart of this version of The Jungle Book. In a way he should be, because he's the heart of the actual Mowgli stories. But that wasn't the case in the animated film, where I would argue Mowgli was bland. He was honestly the least interesting character in the damn movie. And, this was only his it's partially due to the voice actor who had previously already voiced Christopher Robin and, in Winnie the Pooh, and he didn't do much more outside of this. He would go on to also do Christopher Robin again in the next Winnie the Pooh movie, and then he'd do it would be years, literally over 30 years, he'd do like a couple voice acting jobs for, as in like out of Boneville of all things, the Bone adaptation, and here and there. So he's done almost no real acting, and he was going up against the likes of Phil Harris as Baloo, and Louis Prima as King Louie, and of course, George Sanders as Shere Khan. So yeah, it's kind of understandable that perhaps in contrast, Mowgli has a tough time commanding the screen, and it doesn't help that he's written very simplistically. He doesn't seem all that bothered by the fact that he's leaving his life behind. I mean, he's kind of upset about it, but he feels more like, to me at least, he always felt more like an 8-year-old throwing a temper tantrum and having to go to the dentist than a young boy who's being ripped out of his way of life forever and leaving behind the only family he's ever known. So that was a deliberate decision made by Disney. They played that version of the Jungle Book a lot lighter. Here, Mowgli's a much more vital character, and really, Sethi just nails it. And again, consider that he was interacting with, scenery that wasn't there, with characters that weren't there. There were some humans playing, some people playing the animals, sort of. Apparently, Jon Favreau himself often portrayed Baloo during filming against Sethi, which makes sense. He's kind of got the body type for it. He does. No offense, John. Love you. Really, love you. But still, it's a great performance, and then it's supported by a whole bunch of other veteran actors. Of course, Bill Murray, Idris Elba, basically Scarlett Johansson in what amounts to a cameo as Kaa. Kaa has a very small role in this film, and I'll get back to that in a minute. Elvis is quite good as Shere Khan. He definitely brings some weight to the role. He can't quite match George Sanders, which is just one of the great all-time Disney performances, but he's very good. He's very menacing, creepy. Murray's a lot of fun as Baloo, and then you have Christopher Walken as King Louie. And as much as I like these two actors in these parts, they also hit perhaps the only real, shall we say, true false notes in the movie. First, this isn't a musical. Jungle Book isn't a musical, not like the animated film, but there are 2 musical numbers. And it's Bare Necessity, sung by Murray, and, oh God, it's I Want to Be Like You, sung by Walken. Yes, sung by Walken, who, as in the Peter Pan Live from last year, or a couple years ago, he shouldn't be singing. And it's especially awkward because in this version, King Louie is a humongous, giant, Pithecus-like orangutan. He's like twice the friggin' size of Baloo. He's practically the size of King Kong. He's just massive. I mean, he's a legitimately intimidating, frightening character. He's the kind of character in this version where if he had to go up against Shere Khan, you actually believe he could win. And that's saying something, especially against this version of Shere Khan. And the whole scene leading up to his full reveal is filled with tension. The character's basically played like a mix between Colonel Kurtz from Apocalypse Now and like a mob boss. And there's a lot of tension as he's in the shadows, and we see this giant hand come out, and we see all this army of different monkeys subservient to him, and there's building tension because we know that what he wants, Mowgli doesn't know anything about. He wants the red flower, fire, and Mowgli's as clueless as any of the animals, and you're wondering, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And then suddenly the background music completely changes to the theme of I Want to Be Like You. Christopher Walken breaks into song, and the mood is completely and utterly shattered. I don't necessarily mind the idea of Christopher Walken doing a terrible job of singing this wonderful, silly song. Indeed, he sings the full number over the closing credits, which are themselves very delightful, and I actually am going to say, they're worth sitting through. I don't want to spoil it. I know, spoiling credits, but they really are that delightful. They're very playful. They're the effects artists really getting to have a little fun with the characters and the setup and all that, and Walken singing the song there fits. Here, he probably just should have said the line, I want to be like you, with a quick musical cue, instead of actually doing he doesn't quite do the full number, but he does enough that it's just, you're kind of staring at the screen going, what the fuck? And it doesn't fit with the mood of the scene, it doesn't fit with the tone of the overall film, it's a big-lipped alligator moment, really. It's a big-lipped alligator moment. I mean, at least when Baloo sings Bare Necessities, they build up to it where he starts humming it a few times before the full-on music number, and at least it fits the tone and feel of that scene, and it's much more much more naturalistic than when Louis does it, and it's just everything about the way the number's done. Awkward! It's the one false note, the one real false note in the film. But it doesn't ruin it or anything, and they do manage to bring back the tension pretty quickly after that once Louis blows his top. And I do overall love all the voice actors. They do a great job. And of course, as I said, Sethi is marvelous. And I was just also impressed from a story perspective, as this version of the film took a story that, can be contentious among some, and I felt reframed it in a way that really proves there is still value in it. I suppose I should give a little more context to that. Basically, a couple days ago, as of this recording, a piece went up on IO9 of all websites, basically saying, the headline was something to the effect of, don't forget, Rudyard Kipling was racist as fuck, and Jungle Book is imperialist garbage. Something along that lines. It was an awful clickbait headline, even from a site infamous for those. And the article itself wasn't much better. It was a confused mess that was basically trying to say, well, no, context of when it was written doesn't matter, and the fact that, Rudyard Kipling was actually something of a complicated individual. He was, yes. He could be, he produced works that are undeniably racist. He wrote White Man's Burden, and he certainly had very imperialist leanings at times, and he was a hugely influential figure in his day, but at the same time, he was also a man who would then later on lose his son to those very imperialist leanings. He would die, going out into the world to serve Queen and Country, and who in his later life wrote works that basically very much took a stand against that kind of empire building and questioned the point of it, and seemed to at least hint at the idea that he understood on some level that he wasn't being fair to the peoples of India. And he himself grew up in India, and he did love India. He was a complicated figure. Just reducing him down to somebody who was just this, evil racist is far too simplistic of a take. And he was also a great writer, and I grew up with the Jungle Book. I did. I used to listen to books on cassette tapes, and then eventually books on CDs all the time, especially when I got to sleep, because even as a kid, I had a lot of trouble getting to sleep, and I would listen, I'd put books on tape, and we had a whole host of them, everything from, like, Hans Christian Andersen's Hans Brinker. Oh, did I just butcher those names? Well, whatever. Yes, Hans Christian Andersen's Hans Brinker or The Silver Skates. That was a favorite. Zlata the Goat. Just a whole bunch of fairy tales and different stories. And one of my absolute favorites, and then eventually my younger brother's absolute favorites, was The Jungle Book. Now, it wasn't actually the full Jungle Book. A lot of people don't know this, but The Jungle Book is actually a bunch of different short stories, including a number of tales starring Mowgli, which are called Mowgli stories. And there was actually a second, literally, that's the title of it, the second Jungle Book, written by Kipling a year later, where he continued the story of Mowgli and did a few other poems and a few other pieces. And so those stories stretch out. Now, almost nothing of the second Jungle Book has ever been actually adapted to film. And these stories jumped all around. There were elements, like in the second Jungle Book, we get a story before Shere Khan died. Yeah, Shere Khan dies in the actual Jungle Book. Yeah, I know. And we eventually follow Mowgli all the way up to when he's 17 years old. And this tape had all the Mowgli stories combined under the title, The Jungle Book, and I listened to it time and time again, and it was one of my favorite things growing up. And my parents were very liberal Jews growing up in the South, so they were very aware of what to let their kids watch and listen to. They weren't super controlling, but they definitely kept an interest, and there were things we couldn't watch and listen to until we were older at a certain age, and they had no problems with The Jungle Book. And yes, that article isn't entirely wrong. There are certainly imperialist aspects to The Jungle Book. There are at times racist undertones. There are aspects that, from a modern perspective, are troublesome or are unfortunate and should be addressed, in a mature way. They should be acknowledged. They should be discussed. If parents are going to let their kids read the book, it's something they should probably talk to them afterwards so they can better understand it, so they can place it in the proper context. But to just outright say The Jungle Book has no value as a story because of that is ridiculous. That would be like throwing out the complete works of Shakespeare because there are at times sexist overtones in them. They were written in a different age, when there were different standards, and you cannot, as that article wants you to do, just ignore that. You have to place these stories in their context, but also beyond that, there's so much more to the Mowgli stories than just that. They are beautiful works. And whatever you think of Rudyard Kipling, he was a master of the language. He wrote some amazing poetry, and he wasn't all just about imperialist leanings. He wrote plenty of works that had nothing to do with any of that, which were just beautiful works of writing. And The Jungle Book is a classic of English literature, and for a reason. It's well earned. And it was a huge inspiration. The story itself, why does it keep drawing it? Because there's something to the idea of a human being being plopped down in the jungle and raised by the denizens and becoming both part and not part of the jungle that has staying power. That tickles our imaginations. It's nature and humanity coming together in a way that maybe they aren't meant to anymore, or at least that we certainly don't anymore. We don't live that kind of life. We are, for better or for worse, more than just animals. We do have capacity for reason and logic and for looking beyond ourselves. And indeed, that's the ending to The Jungle Book has been something that stuck with me for many, many, many years. Basically, okay, yes, technically spoilers, but the damn thing was published in 1895. Okay, at the end of the Mowgli stories, Mowgli is 17, and he's become very restless. Now, later on, he does for a time in the Jungle Book go to the human village, like he does, sort of, at the end of the animated Jungle Book. But he doesn't really fit in, and he's eventually kind of seen as like a devil or a demon, and he's chased out, and he ends up making real enemies with a human in there who kind of becomes like a second Shere Khan for him, except on the human side. And he basically goes back into the jungle, but, you know, he has many adventures, and he actually helps save the jungle for a number of threats. But he's 17. He's 17, and the jungle no longer feels like enough. He's growing restless. He's growing uncertain. He's growing anxious. And the language during this last chapter is just so beautiful. And you have to understand that we've never gotten a remotely accurate version of Kaa and Baloo on screen. It's actually one of the things I'm curious. There's another Jungle Book movie still in the works. It got pushed back a couple years. And with it looks like how well this Jungle Book's doing, the sequel talk is almost certainly going to continue. Disney's already said they greenlit a sequel, and the movie's already proving on Friday alone successful enough that sequel is all but certainly going to happen eventually, okay? I don't know what will happen to this other version. It's being done by none other than Andy Serkis. Andy Serkis, yes, of Gollum fame, and, you know, who has really pushed for motion capture. And he's unlike the version we got here from Favreau. He's really pushing the motion capture. He's doing Baloo, and he's got Christian Bale as Bagheera, and Benedict Cumberbatch as Shere Khan, and Kate Blanchett as Kaa. So 2 female Kaas in a row. That's interesting, because Kaa is very much male in the original book. I don't know, something in the water, I guess? I don't know, maybe just trying to give it a bit more of a female presence? I don't know, I really don't, but by all accounts, he's trying to go for a more accurate version. I'll be interested to see that, because you have to understand, in the book, Baloo is not the fun-loving character he is in the Disney version. He's a wise, older mentor figure. And in the book, Kaa isn't a villain, he's actually an ally of Mowgli and them. And basically, you know, we are of one blood, you and I, is the refrain. And he becomes an ally, a bought ally to some degree, and a legitimate friend to Mowgli and the others. And indeed, at the end of the book, as I was talking about, Mowgli finally realizes he's got to leave the jungle again. But this time for good, and to try and find his own place in the world. Not necessarily return to the man village, but at least leave behind the jungle. He's grown too big for it. The jungle has grown too small, and unlike so many of the other animals, there's not a place for him. There used to be this Mowgli-sized hole, but he's grown too big for it, and he has to go out into the world and find himself, and it's a very sad thing. I mean, throughout this whole last portion, you know, he basically, he you know, and it's interesting, people talk, you know, you talk about, well, here's it questioning the idea of masculinity and all that, and toxin and all that, and here we have this entire sequence we have again and again, as Mowgli threw himself down, his face in his hands. Kaa responded, "Cry thy cry. We be of one blood, thou and I, man and snake together. Why did I not die under the red dog?" the boy moaned. And basically, Mowgli is sobbing throughout all this, and, you know, Baloo has become very old, and he's now blind, and he can no longer see or hunt, and he's taken care of by others, and Bagheera has become a wilder force, and he only shows up briefly to relieve Mowgli of any debt that he owes him, or that he thinks he owes him. And it's Mowgli realizing he's becoming an adult. It's really just one big metaphor for how children have to eventually leave the home and have to become adults in their own. And especially at the time it was written, it wouldn't necessarily be unusual that maybe the child leaves the country altogether and never sees the parent again. never goes back. Travel wasn't the same as it is now. And it wouldn't be unusual to start a new life somewhere else and to never go back for any number of reasons, and maybe never see the people of your youth, even your family, your parents, again. It wasn't, if you went to America, that could be it. That could be it. And it's a heady thought, and the book really is just very beautiful and capture that. And the wolves are going. He has 3 very close brothers of the wolves who are his brothers, and the rest of the wolf pack has basically already forgetting Mowgli, and they're going with him out of the jungle, even though there's an uncertain place for them. And I've always remembered the last lines are, Baloo basically saying, "Thou hast heard, there is no more. Go now," Baloo said. "First, but come to me. O wise little frog, come to me one last time." "It is hard to cast the skin," said Kaa, as Mowgli sobbed and sobbed, with his head on the blind bear's side and his arms round his neck, while Baloo tried feebly to lick his feet. "The stars are thin," said Grey Brother, snuffling at the dawn wind. "Where shall we lair today? For from now on, we follow new trails." It was an ending that always haunted me as a kid, and it haunts me now in a way as an adult, because it's the whole idea of leaving childhood behind. And so basically, is this a bit of a long-winded, I know, digression, but I just wanted to get across, Jungle Book had a huge impact on me growing up and on a lot of people, and there is still value to this story. We can acknowledge the negative aspects without throwing it all out. And it's not nearly as cut and dry as this article on IO9 wanted to try and espouse. This piece of clickbait bullshit. But and what's interesting, getting back to the movie, is that while the movie is very much an adaptation of the Disney animated adaptation of the Jungle Book, far more than it is a direct adaptation of the actual Mowgli stories, there's definitely more of the spirit of the original novel present here. I would say, look, I love the original Jungle Book. I love the animated Jungle Book. It's a wonderful movie. It's a delight. It's a Disney classic for a reason. It eventually spawned a whole alternate universe TV series, and not for nothing. It has wonderful performances, gorgeous animation, lovely songs. It's a masterpiece. It's a classic. But it presents to us a version of the jungle that's very unreal, very safe, very sanitized, very cartoony. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. But yeah, outside of maybe the final showdown with Shere Khan, and even then, because you got the vultures and all that, the beetle vultures and stuff, there's never too much of a sense of real danger. You're never really that worried for Mowgli. You're never really that upset about what goes on. There's no sense of real danger or stakes. And this time, in this version, there is. There very much is. Shere Khan is a fearsome presence from the word go. But also, there's more sense of the books. Like, in the books, I said in the second Jungle Book, there's this story where we see Mowgli's past, and it talks about the water truce. When how water gets so far down, the animals all agree not to hunt because water's more important than food, and they'll go to the watering hole, and everybody needs to be able to drink. And it's this interesting concept that does have some mirrors, not exactly, but some mirror to real life, and that element gets used in a very key way in the opening of the movie. It's a very important part of the opening of the film, and it's wonderful. And there's a number of other elements that were never actually been adapted, and I'm actually really excited because there's some great Jungle Book stuff that's never been put on screen. Like, there's this whole story about Mowgli encountering a treasure that men have died for over centuries and killed for and not being impressed by it. And there's this amazing story, basically one of before the final Mowgli story, the Mowgli story that was his farewell from the world, the spring running, that's the name of it. There's Red Dog, where Mowgli's wolf pack is threatened by a pack of, well, they're called, can I pronounce this correctly? Doles. They're basically red wolves. They're also called red dogs, mountain wolves. They're kind of, so they're invading the jungle, and they're a threat to Mowgli's wolf pack, and he has to figure out a way to take them down, and Kaa helps him come up with a plan, and it's this really big, if the spring running is the emotional conclusion to The Jungle Book, then the Red Dog, or to Mowgli's stories, the Red Dog is the big action climax. And it is a big action climax. It's exciting. I would love to see that on the big screen. I think that'd be fascinating to do. And so, yeah, the version of The Jungle Book we get here, the jungle itself feels more real. It feels more alive. We get a lot more varied environments. We get a lot more sense of this is a real, breathing, living place, not just a cartoon creation. And there is a definite more of a sense of danger and a definite sense of stakes. And just everything feels richer. Everything feels deeper. Mowgli's journey is much more intense, and the choices he has to make are a lot more interesting, and he's a much more complicated character. He's much more the Mowgli of the books, who, as I said, was a character who made mistakes and often got into danger and got into trouble because of his own pig-headedness, and was someone who was basically torn between two worlds. And that's really what the ending to the Mowgli stories highlights, is that Mowgli, yeah, he has to leave the jungle, but he's not going to really belong in the man's world either. And yes, he said he can come back to the jungle, and he can come back for the jungle for aid, and he could do all that, but he's never really going to fit into either world. But he's still got to go out there and try and find a place for himself and his brothers, even if that's impossible. And there's a definite sense of uncertainty and ambiguity, and there is some of that in this movie. Not at the ending. The ending goes an interesting way, and I don't want to explicitly say the ending, but I will say it's inspired clearly directly by the deleted ending from the original animated Jungle Book, which was itself a hell of a lot darker. Like I said earlier, there was a human who becomes an enemy of Mowgli's, and he basically gets introduced, and eventually we cut ahead 3 months, and which already you can hear, this is near the end of the film, we're jumping ahead 3 months. Oh, no wonder they cut it out, and things get a lot more real. And in a way that's like basically the human ends up dead by Shere Khan's hands, and then Shere Khan gets shot by Mowgli in the head. And this is happening on screen. So Shere Khan doesn't die a Disney death, the classic falling, where gravity is the greatest enemy of all Disney villains, as we well know. No, this is Shere Khan gets effing, he gets one to the head, head tap, dead, on screen, body there. And you can see why they changed it, because it's such tonal whiplash for the rest of the film. And I will say, that's not the ending don't worry, I have not spoiled the ending to this movie. There is an element that I haven't mentioned to that deleted ending that plays a big role in this version of the Jungle Book's ending, and that's all I'll leave it at. I'll just say it's a very effective moment. It's a powerful moment, and it just builds. It's a wonderful climax, and then we get the big action finale, and the way Mowgli defeats Shere Khan in this version is unique to this version, but it works. It works wonderfully, and what follows after it is lovely. And then we get a moment that basically it ends differently than any other version, but it also ends in a way that leaves the room for more stories, and I'm very curious to see where Favreau goes. What I will say is that basically it reframes Jungle Book as a story of a young boy, of adoption, of a blended family, of the way families come together in unique ways, and the way an adopted child can become part of something where he's not a biological member of the family, but he can be just as vital and just as loved and just as important. And that's a great story to have in this day and age. And those are, and right there, it shows the relevance, how you can, with some slight tweaks to a familiar story, bring a fresh relevance to it that very much is important to our times, and says something important to people who will say something important to a whole host of people, to parents and children alike who are dealing with adoption. And it just treats it at the end as a very natural thing. And, there is a sense of how long can this last? Because there is, the child, no matter what, whether adopted or birthed or whatever, a child will hopefully eventually leave the nest and find their own way in life, he says, as he is currently living in his, childhood home with his parents. But look, I do have a full-time job, and I am working towards saving up a couple thousand, and my goal, believe you me, is to move out as soon as possible. I do not want to be here 2-3 years from now. This is not a long-term situation for me, I hope, or any longer term than it has been. Wow, that was me getting a bit defensive. Point is, it was a wonderful ending, even if it's a bit different, and as a lover of Jungle Book, I had no problem with it. And I think the story combined with everything else I've talked about just really highlights what an accomplishment Favreau has managed to produce. So, yeah, I believe that Jungle Book is a roaring success of a movie. Over time, people are going to really come to appreciate how special, how unique, how remarkable this movie is. And even if, from this upcoming slate of movies, even if we only get one more movie that manages to do what Jungle Book does, then I guess maybe it justifies this whole push from Disney on a level that goes beyond just, well, we want to make money. And again, there's nothing wrong with making money. I've always said that. You know, this is a studio, this is a business, and you have to make money. But one would hope, especially from a company like Disney who has proven they're capable of doing this, that money wouldn't be the only factor that motivates you. That, yes, you want to make money, but you also want to make something that's a quality film, something that has artistic merit, and not just, well, it's going to give us the Benjamins. They've already done that earlier this year with, well, Zootopia. And I guess 2016 is shaping up to be a pretty damn good year for Disney movies with talking animals. And so on that note, just one final time, I cannot recommend enough that you go check out The Jungle Book. It is one of the best live-action Disney films in quite some time, and ranks highly, I think, in their overall efforts. And hey, if you've never read The Jungle Book, I also recommend doing that. Check out both of those, The Jungle Book and the second Jungle Book. If you can, look, I know there's a bit of archaic language in that, so if you can, go look for a good audio version. You'd be amazed, like with Shakespeare. Shakespeare can be very hard to read, but it all comes into clarity if you hear it or see it being performed, because the emotion of the actors can help get across some of the language barrier. And to a similar extent, although Jungle Book is a lot less archaic than, say, Shakespeare at this point, but still, a really strong reading of it, and there's any number of those out there, going to Audible, Amazon, you can find them all over the place. Give it a try, give it a listen to, especially if you have kids, it's a great choice. Then you have some good discussions with the kids afterwards, and you're in for a good time. There's all sorts of wonderful stories in there, and there's a lot of beautiful language, and it raises a lot of interesting ideas. And yes, there are imperialist leanings and all that, but it's not all that's there. Yeah, check out The Jungle Book, check out Jon Favreau's Jungle Book, and man, I can't wait to see what he does next, and I can't wait for a sequel, because there's so much potential. I'm very excited, and I almost feel a bit bad for Andy Serkis, because this is going to be hard to top, and I wonder if in the face of the apparent success of this film, and with a sequel coming, they've already pushed back Serkis' film. It was originally supposed to be 2017. Now it's been pushed back to 18, and he's not exactly complaining, because, he says the more time with motion capture, the better, but I wonder if there's going to feel like it's just going to get canceled outright. It would be a shame, because I'm very curious to see Serkis actually direct a full-on film. What we've seen of him as a director is interesting and all that, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see, and I would love to see a different take. I would hope that if nothing else, Serkis gives us, like, an accurate Baloo, an accurate Cock. Because as much as I love Baloo in this film, and I do love Baloo in this film, I would love to see the cranky old mentor Baloo. Well, what will be, will be. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode. If you are interested in more from me, please head on over to www.unrepentedgeeking.com, where you can find all sorts of additional videos and episodes and reviews. There's lots of great stuff on there. You can also head on over to my Patreon at patreon.com/unrepentedgeeking. A few dollars thrown my way to keep the lights on, to keep the wild animals at bay, so I can keep on keeping on. Well, anything you can do would be appreciated. At the very least, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this via iTunes, please rate and review. If you're watching this via Channel Awesome or via Unrepented Geeking, please tweet about it, Facebook it, whatever the hell you kids are doing these days. I'm 36 years old. I'm finally old enough I can start saying, you damn kids, get off my lawn. It's glorious. I feel like I was born to be an old man, a crotchety old man. It's what I was meant to do. But seriously, please spread the word about the show. Anything you could do to help is greatly appreciated. I'm hoping, now I've been very wrong on what I was going to produce the last couple times I've done videos, but I already have this half recorded, and I am working in advance. I got some good stuff coming down the line. Like in June, I'm going to be doing a combination of setup, tribute to the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, and celebration for hopefully for Star Trek Beyond, which hopefully is going to be great. I hope. So Star Trek Beyond. To do that, I'm going to be doing a special themed month, Star Trek comic crossovers. That's going to include Star Trek Planet of the Apes. Yes, it happened. Star Trek Legion of Superheroes. Yep. And Star Trek Green Lantern. Oh, yeah. So we're going to have some fun with that, and I'm hoping to do some Marvel-themed stuff in May, Marvelous May, and Civil War and all that. Again, I've already got quite a bit recorded for episodes for both of those, and I'm trying to work more ahead so that from now on, when I promise you things, I'm actually going to get them done. So hopefully by next weekend, I should have up a new episode of Trailer Talk, where I take a look at a whole bunch of recent trailers from the last few weeks, including Doctor Strange, latest Suicide Squad, all that good stuff, and just share some thoughts on that, and thoughts on films in general. I've got a lot to say about the Harry Potter trailer, and the Harry Potter franchise in general, if it comes to that. I kind of go off on a bit of a tangent. Me? No. But yes, on Harry Potter and my thoughts on the world of Harry Potter, it's good stuff, I hope. You'll like it. Well, you'll actually probably hate it. It'll get you blood boiling. You'll want to come after me with pitching torches and forks and all that. But you know what? They say hate's just love in reverse, so I'll take it. Alright, so until next time for Channel Awesome and Unrepentant Geeking, I'm Shaun Cronenfeld, wishing you all long days and pleasant nights.